Hi, my name is Taylor Coleman, and I will be discussing my proposal on the role of carbon capture processes on climate change. As for the issue at hand, it is important to be aware that climate change is rapidly becoming a bigger topic of discussion. However, some of the solutions being presented pose a very big risk. And that brings me to the issue of carbon capture. Carbon capture, also known as CSS, is a process of taking the CO2 emissions from large industrial installations and then transporting them underground for storage. The idea is that this could resolve the problem of the fossil fuels these industrial plants give off. However, there is much more of a deeper concern to this technology. The question I would like to ask is, should carbon sequestration, also known as carbon capture and storage, and IGCC, be further funded and put more into effect in order to limit the amount of carbon dioxide emissions around the world? There are a variety of problems that arise when talking about CSS. To start off, the cost of CSS is quite high when compared to other technologies that are used for reducing carbon emissions. The process of pumping CO2 underground runs a big risk of leaks. It is said that even a 1% leak from CSS has the potential to dramatically affect climate change for the worse. Also, with these chemicals being placed underground, the contamination of water is highly likely, which in turn can greatly affect the health of civilians. Not only that, but because the excess amount of CO2 placed underground, the risk of earthquakes becomes a concern. Lastly, it is said that even if CSS plants are placed around the world, it is quite unlikely that they would even be of any help until as late as 2030. Now, as for the solutions, I have come up with some flexible ideas. To start off, the most effective way to contribute to making a difference in climate change would be to cut out the idea of CSS and put the funding towards more reliable energy cleaners like solar power, wind power, and even new innovative ideas and inventions. In order to do this, more education should be given out on the risks and damages that CSS pose. However, if CSS were to continue to be funded, it would be absolutely necessary to place laws and policies regarding the placements of these plants, and the requirement of more research in order to lessen the risk of carbon capture. There is quite a bit of information necessary to establish this proposal. In order to provide some background information regarding my topic, I will explain what CSS is and why it is risky. To be able to make sure the audience is aware that CSS is a problem, I will directly talk about how it has the potential to dramatically affect their health and environment for the worse. To advocate for solutions, it will be important to include better and more effective alternatives to CSS, like solar power, or any regulations there should be put on the production of CSS to lessen the risks of it. Throughout my research, I will be using both popular articles and scholarly articles. Most of the information I provide will likely derive from scholarly articles due to the fact that it will help me establish credibility and gain trust with my audience. However, I might find myself using a few popular sources for simple things like definitions. The statistical information that I pull from research is what will aid me in making sure I provide statistics to go along with the facts. The intended audience I am aiming for is advocates that want to make a difference to climate change. This audience will likely consist of people that are looking for and considering different types of solutions to climate change. This audience may mainly consist of people that are curious of whether or not certain technologies claiming to be able to help benefit climate change are actually worth pursuing and funding. A challenge that might be faced with this specific audience are people that are more interested in why CSS is good for our climate change instead of why it should not be used. In order to compensate for these types of challenges, I will make sure to provide plenty of counterarguments within the essay and gaining the trust of these individuals with credible sources that are properly cited. When it comes to my overall topic, I do not have many concerns. However, I would say it can be intimidating having to find credible and significant information incorporating counterclaims that are particularly strong, and having to convince certain readers that stopping the use of CSS is an extremely viable and necessary element to lessening the effects of climate change.